When you jump into indie games made by small studios, it's hard to tell what kind of experience you're going to get. Is it going to be some hidden gem everyone should play? Is it going to be terrible? Or maybe it's somewhere in between. And on top of that, how harshly should you judge the game based on how big that studio is? What the dev is selling to the player, and what the price of the game is? Well, Despair, Blood Curse, developed by the studio Crimson Sequence, comprising of one developer, I believe, is a third-person survival horror game that follows a very simple story of a woman named Anna who is trying to save her sister Catherine from a mansion full of demons, and also some woman named Lillian is not to be trusted. Then outside of that main plot, there are some various notes you can find that adds a little more to the story, but nothing too crazy. Now with that said, let's talk about the gameplay. So obviously, like I stated before, this is a third-person survival horror game which includes all of your staples. You have your shared storage boxes where you can store items that can be extracted from various locations. There are save statues, which each has a limit to how many times you can save at it, which was an interesting idea, though I do believe with the length of the game, these could have only allowed you to save at each one only once or twice to add some extra attention to the game. Also, notice how I'm not mentioning save rooms? Well, you're not necessarily safe in save rooms. That's because when you're in an area that doesn't require loading, enemies can basically follow you anywhere. So if you think you're going to run into a save room to just stay safe, think again. Which also kind of leans into the combat loop of the game and the few issues I have with it. Since the mechanics of the game are incredibly simple, enemies have to be fairly simple as well. Now that doesn't mean you can't be somewhat creative with them, but unfortunately, Despair Blood Curse is not. All fights in the game play out exactly the same regardless of enemy type. You run away since melee combat is very janky and will lead to you most likely dying. So you just run and shoot, run and shoot, run and shoot, and one more time for good measure, run and shoot. And it sucks that it's this way, and I really hope they can update the combat down the road, because a very easy way they could have made the combat more interesting is by adding in a simple sidestep dodge. Nothing crazy like a full-on roll, just a simple sidestep to the left or right. This would allow them to at least alter enemies to add in lunging jumping attacks from a distance to dodge, or something like projectiles that can get spit out by something like the weird lady worm, because it's very important when a game is this short, which I believe it took me roughly 3 hours to play through on the normal difficulty, but you need those enemy encounters to stand out and be memorable. Like the boss fights, that first one in the sewer where you walk up to grab the item, I knew exactly what was coming my way and actually got excited. I'm like, okay, here we go, something with mechanics. It just turned out to be fighting like any other enemy, which these fights or combat scenarios oddly feel diminished because of how open the game is, like in the first mansion area. Because you're not loading into a new room like an old Resident Evil style game, you don't have that tension or being forced to deal with an enemy in those tight spaces. Instead, you can just peek through a door, get aggro, and just either wait and take them out as they come, or run from room to room, slowly take them out in a very relaxing, stress-free environment. Now, the only exception to this is a part where the lights go out in a certain area, some actual tension gets created, because you literally can't see anything without the lantern, and even then, you can only see a few feet ahead of you. I really wish the entire mansion lights would have went out, definitely when you return to it, because that would have been such a claustrophobic experience that would have put your memory of your surroundings to the test. With the limited visibility, since the map you have doesn't show exactly where your character is at in the current area you're in, not to mention the lantern takes up an inventory slot, which would have forced you to be a little more invested into what you're carrying since you have 8 inventory spaces, which almost oddly feels like too much at times. Now, with that said, I do want to say mechanically, the game feels really good. Movement is snappy and aiming is buttery smooth on both controller and mouse. Not to mention performance was really good as well for me, considering my PC is like 10 years old. The environments are pretty cool, they have a nice atmosphere between the sounds enemies make, the flickering lights, and this sort of haziness covering all of it. The main character, Anna, gives me strong vibes that she may also be interested in hunting vampires or dinosaurs as a side gig, and if you know, you know. And also the main axe rifle weapon has a cool design to it I really like. Though, as I was exploring these environments, I really wish we had some proper puzzles within them. Outside of just grab this item here and use it over yonder, there really isn't any puzzles in the game, which is disappointing. I always love a good tough puzzle, or maybe even a simple one to help break up the exploring and combat in survival horror games, which unfortunately this didn't really do. Overall though, Despair Blood Curse is one of those games I would call fun bad. The retro feel and style of the game is one I'm always going to enjoy, even with how surprisingly easy it is. Not to mention that $12 for an investment into a game, that's hardly nothing, but I do hope the game continues to get updates from new content, gameplay improvements, and better animations, because I can say for the 3 hours I spent playing through it, I did not regret 1 second of it.